Off by reading the webcasting introduction, and I'd like to remind everyone present that this hybrid meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or other such use by third parties. Therefore, by participating in this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. If any public speakers on the MS Teams do not wish to have their images captured, they should ensure that their video setting throughout the meeting is turned off and set to audio only. Please also be aware that if technical difficulties interrupt the meeting that cannot be overcome, I may need to adjourn the meeting, and members are reminded to activate the microphone before speaking and switching them off after they're done. Agenda item 2 is advice to public and speakers attending the council planning subcommittees. It's there for your noting on pages 5 to 6 of your agenda pack. And just as a kind of simple introduction, good evening everyone and welcome to this meeting of the Area Plans South Subcommittee on Wednesday the 6th December 2023. I'm your chairman, Councillor Kaz Rizvi from Chigwell Village. To my right I have Councillor Baldwin as my vice chair, Vivian Messenger from Democratic Services, Steve is our webcasting officer, and to my left I have James Rogers from Planning, and I will be a voting chairman if necessary. So moving on to agenda item 3, apologies for absence.
Chairman, I've had apologies from Councillors Bannett, Murray, Councillors Judy and Bob Jennings, Lyon and Mead, and Councillor Barlow.
Councillor Chris Pond.
Chairman, sorry, microphone.
Yes, apologies also from Councillor Jogia, who has been sent abroad by her employers.
Noted. Okay, moving on to agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Any members with any declarations of interest? Councillor Chris Pond.
In respect of item number 12, I know several of the people round and about that site. I don't know any of them particularly well, so it's not a prejudicial interest in any sense.
Noted. Councillor Caroline Pond.
I'll join in that as well.
Noted.
Did it work?
Yeah. Thank you. Any other member with a declaration of interest? No? So moving on to agenda item 5, minutes, and that's to confirm the minutes of the last meeting of the subcommittee held on 8th of November 2023. It's on pages 7 to 8 of your agenda pack. Can we take those as agreed? Agreed. And any other business? So just one piece of business for noting, which is relevant to item 14, and that's EPF 141523-6 Great Oaks Chigwell. The applicant themselves has asked for the application to be deferred to a subsequent committee meeting because they're unavailable today. So we'd had a pre-meeting and all felt that that was appropriate. So that application would be brought back to a subsequent committee meeting. If any members of the public who were going to stay for that item, agenda item 14, 6 Great Oaks Chigwell, will be brought back to a subsequent committee meeting, so it will not be discussed today. Okay, so that was for noting, and if we move on to item 7, site visits. Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to request a site visit for item 13 on tonight's agenda. That's EPF 0726-23, and it's a garage site in Burney Drive in Loughton. So I'd like to request a site visit for that, please.
Okay. Do we have any grounds for a site visit or any reasons for a site visit on that before we go to the seconder?
Well, it's attracting considerable interest, I think, in the local community, which I think is a valid reason. And I happen to be one of the ward councillors there, so I have a particular interest in this site. And I could go on further if you wish, but I think that's sufficient, probably, information that you need.
Okay, and do we have a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that, Chairman, and add as the reasons this is a landlocked site and it is difficult to access as an ordinary councillor and member of the public.
Okay, so if we can go to a vote, so if we have a show of hands, all those in favour of a site visit for that application.
9, Chairman.
All those against?
1.
And any abstentions?
5, Chairman.
Okay, so that application has been deferred pending a site visit and will be brought back to a subsequent committee meeting. So any members of the public who are here to listen to agenda item 13, which is the garage site, Burney Drive, Loughton, if you wish to stay for the rest of the meeting, you're most welcome. But if you want to leave, that's also entirely understandable. Okay, so Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Apologies for this, because I think we need a site visit for another item as well, unfortunately, and I do say unfortunately, which is item 12, which is EPF 219323. The reason being I've had correspondence from both the applicant and an objector, and I've said to the applicant I personally would like to pop in and have a look. I didn't want to trouble the whole committee, and they've emailed back, I think probably quite rightly, saying they would like me to go through the proper procedure to ask for a site visit. So I'm going through what is our only procedure, which is to ask for a site visit. And I've just had from both sides people saying this is my position, and it's impossible without seeing it properly to make a proper view.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Fine.
I'll second, Chair.
Okay. So if we can again have a show of hands, all those members in favour of a site visit for agenda item 12, please show.
Ten, Chairman.
And all those against?
None, Chairman.
And abstentions?
5, Chairman.
Okay, so that application has also been deferred pending a site visit and will be brought back to a subsequent committee meeting. So as before, any members of public who are here to listen to agenda item 12, 155 Forest Road, Loughton, if you wish to leave the meeting, that's absolutely fine. Any speakers on that item as well, by the way, we don't have to stay for the remainder of the meeting. Okay, fine. So if we move on to the first item of the evening, which is agenda item 8, and that's EPF 1169/23, 11 Ticehurst Hill, Loughton, IG10 1BX, and I'll hand over to Planning Officer Mr. James Rogers to present the application.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, everybody. Yes, so the first item tonight is 11 Ticehurst Hill in Loughton. The proposal is to increase the height of an existing two-storey side extension on a house, extend it further to the rear, add a rear dormer window and a single-storey rear extension. Now, it's before members tonight due to an objection from Loughton Town Council and a neighbour, and officers are recommending that planning permission is granted. So starting with the location, the site is on the western side of Ticehurst Hill, which is within the built-up area of Loughton. This is the existing house here. Members can see the close proximity of the neighbouring dwelling, whose ridge incidentally exceeds that of the application site. So it's a very cheek by jowl sort of street scene. And just to put it into plan form, this shows the existing dwelling in that context. You can see the higher ridge of the neighbouring property here. This photograph shows the existing dwelling in relation to the neighbours. Number 9 has previously been extended and its rear elevation projects beyond that of the rear elevation of the application site, which is clearly this building here. On the other side, the adjacent neighbour has not been extended. The attached neighbour and members can see that their rear elevation is currently equitable with the application site. So these are the proposed drawings. The first thing to note is the first floor side element has been increased to match the ridge of the existing house, so that's this bit here. It maintains a hipped roof profile, which actually obviously then slopes away from the adjacent neighbour, reducing its potential bulk in the street scene. If we then look at the side elevation, so the existing and the proposed, we can see that the first floor element extends back towards the rear but doesn't exceed the existing rear. So it actually sits flush or adjacent to the existing side elevation of the neighbouring property, which you can see here. It doesn't extend beyond that. The rear elevation, which is this drawing, shows the rear dormer window. As members will know, most of the time, rear dormer windows are permitted development. They're generally uncontentious residential extensions. And finally, the rear extension, the single-storey rear extension, which projects 3 metres beyond the existing rear elevation. So that's a reasonable projection. If in most cases, a 3 metre deep rear extension would be permitted development again. So overall, and given the length of the gardens as well, I should say that the gardens are quite generous in terms of their width and their depth. So overall, it's not considered that there would be excessive harm to the living conditions of neighbours, nor would it cause harm to the character and appearance of the street scene. So overall, officers are recommending that the planning permission is granted, subject to the conditions set out in tonight's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. We do not have any speakers on this agenda item. I would draw members' attention to one typing error on page 11, which refers to the consultations carried out, and it refers to Epping Town Council. Quite clearly, it is Loughton Town Council. It's something that came up in our briefing beforehand as well. So, just for clarification, it is indeed Loughton Town Council that was consulted on this. So we have one of the ward councillors in attendance, Councillor Kaufman, if you wanted to start off with any comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know the site well. I mean, it's a little bit confusing because there's a slope here, and so matching ridge heights, it's still going to look, it's right on the edge, I think. I was just concerned, what is the separation distance between the extension and the adjoining house? It looks like, because the site slopes and it gets right close to the bordering fence. Is there actually space around at the ground level? Thank you.
Yes, good question. So the site isn't straight, let's say. So at its closest point, 0.2 metres away from the boundary, at its furthest away, around 0.4. So it is close in terms of the single-storey element.
I'd be very interested to hear what other members say. Normally, for a house of this quality in this location, it would be preferable to maintain the separation, and it's even good for the people who live in these houses that you can get through. And I'm surprised the officers haven't pushed back a little bit, because that is incredibly close to the boundary. I don't want to be difficult, but I'd be interested to hear what others say.
Yeah, Councillor Chris Pond.
Thank you. Well, of course, this is a semi-detached house, and being that this was Loughton Urban District Council, there is no number 13, so the adjoining property is number 15. And I am slightly worried about the bulk of this extension. Not so much crowding the street scene as disproportioning the pair of semis. Number 15 has, I think, not been extended significantly. And so it's going to just look a bit of a mess, I think. So I share Councillor Kaufman's concerns, as well as the non-attached neighbour, where that's a very narrow passageway, I would think about 2 foot wide at the very most, and the attached neighbour to the north. So I just wonder if this isn't cramming the site with more than it can actually take.
Any other members that wish to contribute? Okay, so I think if we can move to a vote on that application then. So members, the officer's recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions. Can we have a show of hands of all those in favour? Please show.
Nine, Chairman.
And all those against?
3, Chairman.
And abstentions?
4, Chairman.
Okay, so that application has been approved. So if we move on to our next application for the evening, which is agenda item 9, which is EPF /1500/23 Skyhaven 87 Oakwood Hill Loughton, IT103EP, and I'll hand over to our planning officer Nathaniel Rami, who will be joining us on Teams, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So item 9 is at 87 Oakwood Hill, and the proposal seeks to erect a Part 2, Part 1 story rear extension. And it's before members this evening due to objections from the Town Council and members of the public. This is the site here, it's the adjoining neighbour, and this is number 89, which angles away from the host dwelling, and satellite image of the site and various site photos. This is the adjoining neighbour, which has a similar extension, similar to what is being proposed for this site. And then these are the various plans. This is the property in its existing form. You can see over here. We should note that the property has previously been extended under application EPF 058992, so some time ago. And this is the floor plan for the proposed extension. So the single story element of the extension will project to about 3.7 meters from the rear of the host dwelling. Will have a maximum height of 3.5 meters with an eaves height of 2.5 meters, and the materials proposed will accord with the existing dwelling. The first floor rear extension, which would be a part rear extension, would be set back from the neighbouring occupier here by about 2.7 meters, will extend beyond the rear wall by about 3.6 meters, and from the ground floor level have a maximum height of 6.8 meters. And these are the elevations. So this is the proposal from the front, no change. This is to the rear, from the side, apologies. This is from the rear, and this is the right side as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rami. And again, we don't have any speakers on this agenda item. We have one of the ward councillors in attendance, Councillor Rosebrooks. Did you want to say anything?
Yes, thank you very much. I'd just like to point out, though we looked at a semi previously in Ticehurst Hill, these plots are very small, I have to say, and I have great sympathy for the neighbours, feeling, even though they've extended, that it will be pretty tight, really. Thank you. Could you just slow up that last slide where we can see the street scene?
Tom went to
That's
stop.
right, yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
Yes, yeah. The plots don't go back very far, and I can see why the Town Council have asked about the balcony. But I don't see sufficient grounds to turn it down. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Do we have any other members that wanted to contribute on this? Councillor Bixley.
I just wonder if it's possible for the officer to show us how it will compare with the next door neighbour as extended. I wasn't too clear on that. It wasn't a very clear description.
What do you mean? So do you mean the neighbour here, the adjoining neighbour?
Yeah, if you go back to the photograph which you showed, that one.
Yeah.
So the house to the left, that's already been extended as shown.
Yes.
Will this extension to this current application I'm just trying to make a comparison between what the people have done next door and what will be the result of the new extension if it's approved. I mean, if it looks something similar to that, then I don't think I would have an objection, but I don't know if it's possible to illustrate that more clearly.
Yeah, so we can see here that it doesn't extend beyond the neighbouring extension, and then the elevations here, so it's very similar, same monopitched roof design for the single-storey element, set back from the boundary, and then we have this gabled element here. The only difference, I believe, is that in this one there will be a Juliet balcony proposed.
So the ground floor extension part of it would extend a little bit further than the neighbours. Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
No, they'll be flush.
Yeah, Councillor Senna.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the ward colleague, the ward councillor has already outlined that she doesn't think she has enough grounds to refuse this. I think actually it complements the property next door as well. They're only asking for what their neighbours have got, and I'm going to support this application. I think it's a good application. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Any other members wishing to speak? Yeah, Councillor Chris Bond.
I don't know this site well. I'm loath to suggest a site visit, but could the officer take us through the question of the balcony, the prohibition of forming a balcony, sitting out patio at first floor level, and how that's to be accomplished?
Yes, thank you for the question. So the balcony proposed a Juliet balcony, so there will be no platform extending from the property, as you can see here. Furthermore, there was be a distance between the Juliet balcony proposed and the rear garden is over 20 metres. So in terms of its impact on neighbours to the rear, there will be no harmful impact on amenity in that regard. And I believe that they can do this under permitted development, albeit this being part of an extension, so that may not be relevant, but it's just to highlight the fact that the Juliet balcony being proposed will not have a harmful impact on neighbouring amenity. And as I said before, there isn't a platform proposed, so there is no platform extending. If I can just go back here, you can see there will be no platform being extended from the Juliet balcony.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Well, it does in part, because I couldn't see on the plans, either when I was looking at them earlier or up here, whether or not there was to be a platform. I'm glad that there isn't. But I think the officer has it slightly wrong when he says that it's permitted development, because it's not permitted development, because it's new build. And it is part of the application. If it were an existing building, then there is a PDR on Juliet balconies. All in all, I don't think it's worth pursuing the objection, but I do think it may have more effect than is thought on the neighbour.
Members, I think we could go to a vote on this. So if we can have a show of hands of all those in favour. And all those against?
0.
And abstentions?
1.
Okay, so that application has been approved. So if we move on to agenda item 10, which is EPF/2047/23, way back 179 Lambourne Road, Chigwell, IG7 6JU. And I'll hand over to our planning officer, Callum Wright, who is also presenting on Teams. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and evening members. So let me share my screen. Okay, so the application I am discussing today is for a proposal to a variation of Condition 2 relating to the plan numbers for a previously approved scheme overturned at appeal following a refusal at committee. The scheme brought forth to the planning committee due to an objection received from a ward councillor as well as at least one non-councillor resident. The site in question is 179 Lambourne Road, or Wayback, in Chigwell. It comprises of a large detached chalet-style bungalow situated within the semi-rural area of Chigwell Road. It is not listed within a conservation area or the green belt. So it's set back from the buildings here. We've got some views from the street scene from the front road and also from Crosby Court. So these are some context photos. I just want to clarify here, this is an application for a variation to Condition 2 to the plans. So there is a consented scheme on the site already. So that is not what is going to be there. I'll get onto them when I show the previously approved plans. This is the front elevation. This is the flank elevation facing eastwards. This is the boundary treatments and the neighbours. I'll go through these a bit quicker, but specific context here. This is that same neighbouring boundary, but showing the gap. This is from Crosby Close. And this is the opposing boundary outlook. So, and even more angles from neighbours. So these are now the approved plans. They demonstrate the scheme which has currently got an approval on site, meaning that this has already had consent, if I haven't stressed that enough. I'll just go through them. So they demonstrate a two-storey single-family dwelling, setback and in alignment with that adjacent unit. These are the front and rear elevations. There is also approval for this outbuilding here, which is of relevance to this application. These are the floor plans. We've got the ground floor and the first floor here. And this is the roof plan. So onto the proposed plans. I don't know why the orientation is swapped around. We've got these as part of the current application. The first change seeks alterations to the entrance in order to widen this area here, which involves amendments to the footprint of this front gable end. It's actually widening and getting shorter compared to the approved plans. There is also slight amendments to the rear gable, and if you notice here, there's an area of flat roof which was formerly part of a pitched roof. The second change seeks alterations to the fenestration of the main dwelling house. So the glazed sliding doors on the eastern elevation is now going to be replaced with fixed windows, and also on that eastern elevation at first floor, there are new windows proposed. So it's noted that these windows would look over the ancillary garden space of this associated dwelling. The third change proposed is a alteration to the footprint of this already approved outbuilding. They're actually seeking to extend an additional metre towards the dwelling house, occupying this space highlighted here. The fourth change involves alterations to the revised materials, alterations to the material schedule. It seeks to replace the natural white Portland stone cladding with a light grey multi-brick with light matching mortar. No further changes are proposed to the external finishes, and obviously to accommodate the above changes, the scheme would also involve minor amendments to the internal layout. So in terms of, as already confirmed that the consent allowed on site, the proposed development would not have any adverse impacts on the character and appearance of the street scene or the wider locality. The proposed variation to Condition 2 include the alteration to the entrance, the addition of new fenestration, increase in main building and outbuilding footprint, and minor change in the material schedule would retain this lack of adverse impact. None of the changes proposed would represent harm to the enjoyment of nearby neighbouring amenities in terms of overlooking, loss of privacy, overshadowing, overbearing, and visual impact. Consideration was specifically made to the changes in built form, which are of a sufficient distance away from neighbours, or the introduction of new first floor windows which would only overlook the garden of the host dwelling. The representations received have been acknowledged in consideration of this, but it appears they're primarily in response to the consent on the site, which has already been granted by the planning inspectorate under appeal. So for the reasons set out in the agenda, we would like to recommend approval subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Callum Wright. So we have three speakers on this application. We'll start off with the objector, who is here in person, Mr. James Waters. Mr. Waters, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, I am the owner-occupier of 8 Crosby Court, which adjoins Wayback on its west side. I've studied all the documentation associated with this application as it is made available to the public within EFDC's planning register for this application. It appears that the front elevation southwest corner of the proposed house will be positioned some 2 metres further forward than that of the existing Wayback. From the submitted design drawings, I also calculate that the height of the west-facing 2-storey wall is the same as the overall roof height of existing Wayback. This wall is then surmounted by a steeply pitched roof with an overall roof height of about 9 metres, as compared to approximately 6.1 metres for the existing Wayback and 7.3 metres from my own house. The west-facing wall of the proposed house will be approximately 3.2 metres from the east-facing gable wall of 8 Crosby Court. Could I point out that the applicant's document reference 008850954, amended section AA east-west, is across to northern rear half of the proposed house. No section east-west across the southern front half of the proposed house appears to have been submitted to EFDC. This is the main area of my concern, since this part of the proposed house, as described above, is not staggered, as has been suggested by the case officer. The significance of the above is that our house has a first floor window in the gable wall at present. Wayback is set slightly to the rear of this window and does not restrict light. However, this window would become overshadowed due to the forward positioning of the southwest corner of the proposed house. Proximity of the higher west-facing wall and surmounted roof of the proposed house would considerably reduce present levels of natural light to this window. The daylight and sunlight report identifying the window as number 19 refers to just 7.7% loss of vertical sky component to window number 19. And whilst I'm in no position to challenge this calculation, I do feel it's over-optimistic in terms of the amount by which the loss of light would be received in reality. In my view, this problem will be alleviated by restricting the position of the proposed south-facing west gable to the same building line as the existing Wayback. In closing, in my opinion, the planning officer has not taken into account the difference of the height and shape of the front half of the proposed development, which will have a much more overbearing impact on my property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. We have a second speaker on this item, which is Councillor Selina Jeffcoat, as the Chair of Chigwell Parish Council Planning Committee. Councillor Jeffcoat, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. While planning officers may consider this a minor amendment, and indeed it may look so at first glance, the impact on neighbouring properties will be anything but. Planning officers have not mentioned this site is adjacent to, and in some previous planning applications, within the curtilage of a Grade 2 listed building, yet the listed buildings officers have not been consulted regarding the change in cladding treatment. You've heard from a neighbour this evening asking councillors to refuse this application, and we at the parish also ask the council to seriously consider their valid concerns. What is not noted in your report is that the parish council strongly objected to this on the grounds the proposal will lead to an unacceptable reduction in the separation distance between the property and adjacent property. The original application was recommended for approval by officers but refused by this committee. It was granted on appeal and, as is very common, the request by the applicant for costs was refused. The planning inspector noted that, as they always do, the council members were entitled not to accept the professional view of officers so long as a case could be made for the contrary view. Even more important, the planning inspector, when granting the appeal, said, and I quote, "The proposed dwelling has been set away from the boundary, and this would overcome concerns expressed by an interest party regarding the dominance of the proposed scheme on their living conditions." Although Epping Forest planning officers didn't request it, the inspector also removed all future permitted development rights. Previously, this development was far enough away, at enough of a distance, that the inspector considered the concerns of the residents that this building would impact on their living conditions have been overcome. What is before you today is an alteration that removes that distance from the boundary, the distance the inspector gave so much weight to when allowing this application at appeal, that brings this substantial mansion so close it will tower over the cottages of Crosby Court. You've heard tonight from the resident whose home is closest, who will live in the shadow of this very large property that is proposed to replace the chalet bungalow that occupies the site currently. We at the parish have brought to your attention that this amendment removes the mitigation specifically referred to by the inspector when he overruled your objections before. Officers again are recommending approval. Again, you are entitled not to accept their professional view. Planning policy DM9 of the local plan requires that a proposal should not adversely impact on the amenity of neighbours. This proposal, by removing the distance from the boundary identified by the planning inspector, will without a doubt now impact on 8 Crosby Court. We ask the committee to consider refusing on the grounds that it would therefore be contrary to policy DM9H of the adopted local plan and paragraph 130F of the National Planning Policy Framework 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffco. And we have a third speaker, who is Mr. Andrew Riley, and the applicant's representative, who is here in person. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. I'm Andrew Riley, Director of Planning at DLB Planning Consultants, and speaking on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Wahid, and his family. As has been outlined, this site has planning permission to be redeveloped to create one new family home. In fact, it actually has 2 planning permissions. One was granted in December 2020, and one was granted in July early this year. The second of these 2 permissions is actually smaller and more modest than the first permission that was granted. The reason I raise these points, as the officer does, is because it's very important for the context of what is being proposed by the application before you. We understand and acknowledge the concerns that have been raised by the parish council and local residents, noting that the new dwelling would be potentially overbearing, resulting in a loss of light to the neighbouring property. But respectfully, these are points that have already been considered and were judged to be acceptable when planning permission was granted. Rather, this ultimately is an application to amend that planning permission. And as set out in the planning officer's report and presentation, actually these amendments are very modest. They are, as has been set out, seeking to change the roof form of part of the first floor from a pitch roof to a flat roof, changing some of the glazing on the fenestration from, for example, a glazed sliding door to a ground floor living room to a fixed window. And in relation to the width of the property, it's actually only a very small section at the front of the property that's adjacent to number 8, but is set, to the immediate side of that property, not to its rear. That is the only section that will be getting modestly wider, and that's to accommodate a slightly larger entrance to the property. So these are ultimately minor changes to the family home that have been approved. They are largely either cosmetic or practical in nature, essentially allowing the applicant to improve the scheme to suit his and his family's needs when it's constructed. In our view, these amendments will not be harmful to amenity or to the character of the area where a new dwelling has already been granted in this permission. The amendments won't change the location of the dwelling. That will stay as it's currently been approved. Will not result in the dwelling increasing in height. There is only the very modest increase in a small part of the width of the building. And just 2 new windows, I believe, will be added to the approved scheme, and they are on the elevation facing away from Crosby Court, the eastern elevation that look onto the garden, the approved garden of the dwelling, so not resulting any potential for any sort of new overlooking or loss of amenity in that regard. Fundamentally, the planning permission that exists is for the redevelopment of the site to create one new family home, and this will not change as a result of the amendments that we are seeking your approval for. So we hope that you will support the application to enable Mr. Wahid and his family to build their new home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. We have a few of the Chigwell councillors present this evening. Councillor Sanger, did you want to start off with anything?
Thank you, Chairman. The planning officer alluded that one of the councillors have called this in. I'm assuming, would that have been Councillor Barnard for Chigwell Road? That's my first question. The application has been called in by Councillor Barnard?
I think, no.
Actually, state. Sorry, you need to say that.
It's because of the objection. Okay, that's fine. I think that's fine.
Yeah,
okay,
I
so
my understanding is that I think it's before committee because it was objected on by the parish council and more than one resident, rather than called in by a councillor.
that's fine. Okay, so I've got a couple of questions here. In terms of the increase in volume of the house, the applicants mentioned that in 2020 the application was granted, and this application that was amended in July 2023 is a small development. However, if you look at the actual drawings, the increase that you're now asking for, my question is, what percentage increase is that from what is already been granted? So how much is that being increased? How much percentage is it being increased by? And the other question is, under permitted development rights, am I right in saying that you can build 50% up into the garden area? Because you've got the outbuilding there as well, so you might want to correct me on that as well. And I'd like to come back if you could answer those first. Thank you.
Callum, would you be able to shed a bit of light on those 2 points that Councillor Sanger has mentioned, as regards to kind of the percentage increase that is being asked for as part of this application, and then the query regards to permitted development rights?
Yeah, so we'll start off with the percentage increase. The footprint of the building itself is changing slightly to the front, as mentioned. In terms of a percentage increase itself, it's relatively the same in comparison to that of the previous approval. The outbuilding itself, in terms of permitted development, would still be within the coastage allowance. I will have to quickly check on the previous conditions. I don't think we actually restricted any permitted development rights on that one, but given the 1 metre increase to the west, that still wouldn't exceed the 50% coastal space, which is quite significant.
Yeah, Councillor Sanger, if you wanted to come in.
Thank you very much for that. And just one final question I'd like just to be cleared up. Chigwell Parish Council, Councillor Jeffcott mentioned that's within the curtilage of a Grade 2 listed building. Does that come into the equation? I know it's in your report, but how much impact does it have? Thank you.
Actually, my apologies for the reminder, that wasn't in my speech. Thank you very much. So there is sufficient distance between the listed building and sufficient boundary treatments for the additional impacts beyond what was considered at the original application to be considered material. All of that was assessed within the previous report and the inspector's decision. So what we're essentially saying is these alterations aren't considered material to that decision.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll prepare to listen to other members.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Callum, I'd just like to ask a couple of questions as another Chigwell councillor. So, you know, I wasn't a fan of the original application. Sadly, that was overturned by the appeal inspector on reasons why, you know, it's listed into your report. You know, it does seem somewhat minor as you presented in the report, but I'm minded to have sympathy for the objector and the impact that it would have on their dwelling. So the way that I see it, I think the nub of the issue is whether the additional window that's being proposed, you know, what impact it would have on the residents at Crosby Court. So I was wondering if you could get some images back up to show where the additional window is in relation to Crosby Court.
Yes, bear with me a second.
Sure. Because I think, you know, any increase, so the other three kind of amendments, I agree, I think they're fairly mild and wouldn't necessarily have a big impact. The request for increase in footprint of the garden outbuilding, again, that doesn't sit very easy with me because I can fully recognise that that would have an impact on the neighbours and a loss of amenity space for the neighbours at Crosby Court. I think the main, as I said, the main nub of the argument seems like it is, you know, the loss of amenity as a result of the window.
Okay, so when you refer to the window, are you referring to sort of the first floor
Yes.
flank ones? So these windows are essentially overlooking the garden, which is associated with the dwelling that we are discussing. There's trees here and boundary treatments, so essentially it would only be overlooking its own garden.
Okay, and are these windows already as part of the approved application that was approved at the, or overturned at, by the appeals inspector?
The application is seeking the addition of these windows at first floor.
Okay, and that is just something that I wanted to be 100% clear about in my mind, so I'm fairly clear about that. Does any other member want to contribute? Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I think that there's sort of a conflict here in that this was allowed on appeal, and I remember the discussion when we refused permission, which was later allowed on appeal. I think from my point of view, the changes are minor, but I understand minor changes can have a larger impact. I think the big disappointment for me is I believe it was going to be clad in Portland stone at one point, and it's now going to be grey brick. I think I actually sided with the application when it was discussed on the basis that it was a pretty innovative design and a really good use of materials, and I think a huge amount of that's been lost from Portland stone down to grey brick, but I think where it is a minor amendment, and I probably will be approving it depending on the rest of the debate. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan.
Unfortunately, I did miss this at Parish, so one of my questions is, what's the distance between the two buildings now, the separation distance? Because I couldn't see that on the plans. And the second one is the flat roof. If we can just see the plans where the flat roof is, please, because it's now flat roof and I want to see what's going onto the flat roof.
So the first question, Callum, was about separation distance, and the second one was in relation to the design of the flat roof.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so the separation distances, it's a requirement on all applications for 1 metre, at least 1 metre as a boundary to be retained, if that's what you're referring to. In terms of the actual plans themselves, here. So was this the proposed floor plans you wanted to see?
Yes, because I couldn't quite see from the new bit that comes out to widen it, how far it is from the boundary and from the adjoining building.
1 metre retained here. There's obviously a gap between the actual separate building on this side as well, but to the boundary it's 1 metre.
Okay.
And the flat roof, please, if I could see the plans, the side elevation for the flat roof.
Yep, here we go. So it's sort of concealed by this front gable, you know, as seen from the street scene and the close.
Thank you. I still have an issue with the fact that I do think that it's affecting the neighbouring property for their loss of amenity, so I won't be supporting this.
Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Chair. Would the officer be able to show us the street scene plan again, please?
Yeah, just bear with me. Do you mean the front elevation, or do you want the image of the street scene?
How it sits with its neighbour looking from the front, please.
think it's
Sure.
got a plan on this document. Right, here we go. So this is the, bear with my computer, apologies. Here we go. And bearing in mind again, this is as approved as well. There's no changes to the height massing in any way as seen from this angle.
Okay, so my issue with this one is this job is difficult enough as it is. So on the original application, I was against it. And so I have to be consistent with my view, unfortunately. The inspector has had a different opinion. I'm just concerned, there's something here that I can't quite interpret between the height of the new scheme, the impact on this flank wall with the neighbour, which these plans aren't showing me, because that doesn't look too bad. So I don't understand what the Trigwell Parish has obviously said. There's an issue with the height and the objector said there's an issue on the height of the flank wall that adjoins their property, which is going to impact on their light, whether it's because it's moved forward. It doesn't seem to have moved closer, but it's very difficult to interpret. So I just need a better explanation of what the problem is, please.
Yep.
Apologies. Does that mean you want to see an additional plan?
I just need to see the impact of the changes clearly on the neighbour, and these plans are not doing it for me.
Okay. Perhaps there's a better plan. Perhaps I could show James or.
Callum, try the proposed site plan.
Okay, so I've got the block plan here. So I guess this is the nearest neighbour here. The window is there, so we've got this gap here. I measured it. It's approximately 3.6 metres. There's the 1 metre retained gap there to the boundary itself. As the boundary intersects it, it does become closer, but the window at this point. I mean, in terms of height, again, just for clarity, it is the same as beforehand. This outbuilding is of sufficient distance from any other dwelling, so obviously the nearest neighbour is in fact here. I mean, is there any other slide I could share to clarify that more?
Okay, I think it does give a little bit of an idea. Councillor Sanger, did you want to come back in?
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. I did raise a point about permitted development. When the application was granted last time, could the officer confirm if permitted development rights were removed or not? Thank you.
Yes, I've actually got the so the plan. It's actually on the agenda. They're all the same condition carried over. So if I just get that up, or if any of the other officers on the panel have that to hand, that'd be very handy just to check it's actually been removed.
And Councillor Williamson, sorry, did you want to come back in?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure. I've got exactly the same plan on my iPad, but it has from that front corner to the boundary a dimension on there of 1.8 metres. It actually shows it as 1.8 metres from the boundary. And I've got levels on here as well, which don't appear to be on the one.
Okay, is it in the supporting documents, I guess?
This is off the website.
Yeah, so Callum, it might be, I think what Councillor Kaufman was referring to, I think might be available in the supplementary documents on the application reference, which is on the portal. If I move on to Councillor Allgood, because you've had your hand up for a while, sorry. Mike, please. Ken. Ken.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can I see a plan of the permitted footprint and the new proposed footprint? And can you sort of enlarge it? Because it's quite difficult from this angle too. I just want the obviously disputed neighbour aspect.
Yeah, just for me. So this one here, this one here is the previous. This one is here is the one that we put forth, was with the flat roof. Zoom out. Sorry. Apologies. So yeah, this one is the one, the previous approved one. This one is the one put forth. I'll try and make that clearer for you in terms of the comparison of the footprint itself. I mean, it's essentially the same. And we still consider it acceptable and minor material.
Chair, if I may, I think the area we're talking about is if you take the ridge line and run a parallel line from the corner, the bottom left corner of that part, and run it straight, it is that sliver of a triangle. It is close, so there's no doubt about that. But it is the amount of that, I think.
And the question that I had was exactly that at the start, which is how much closer does it become where it becomes detrimental to the residents over at Crosby Court? And my personal view on it is that I think it does result in a loss of amenity space, and it is more overbearing on the residents at Crosby Court for that exact reason. But again, I know that the committee have sort of had their own views on it. Councillor Morgan, did you want to come back in on anything?
Actually, he just said exactly what I was going to say. The flank wall has moved closer. And also, I'm a bit confused because I believe the permitted development was removed due to the proximity of development, and now the planning officer is saying it wasn't. So has it been removed or has it not been removed, please?
Yeah, so just clarification that condition was not put forth on the current application, so the permitted development has been removed as a previous one. It can be attached to this application if put forth for members' recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay. I think, members, we can go to a vote on this, unless there's anybody else with anything burning. Councillor Owen.
Just whatever we decide. If we decide to approve it, we should remove permitted developments as part of the condition.
Okay. Yeah, noted. Okay, so if we can have a show of hands, members, the officer's recommendation is to approve with conditions. If we can have a show of hands, all those in favour?
None, Chairman.
And all those against?
Ten, Chairman.
And abstentions?
6, Chairman.
Okay, so if we can move on to the grounds for refusal, I'd like to propose grounds as loss of amenity space for the residents at 5 and 8 Crosby Court as one of the reasons, alongside the overbearing nature of the new application. Does anybody else want to add anything else in? Councillor Williamson?
Viv?
Yep.
I think it's the material change to the elevations to the grey brick from Portland stone.
Okay, so change of the materials as well. Anybody else? Okay, so members, we have those as grounds for refusal. If we can have a show of hands, all those in favour of those grounds for refusal.
Twelve, Chairman.
All those against?
None, Chairman.
And any abstentions?
3, Chairman.
Okay, so that application has been refused. So moving on to agenda item 11. Any members of the public that wish to leave at this point, you're absolutely welcome to stay, but if you wanted to leave, that's also fine. If we move on to item 11, which is EPF /2084/23, 51 Algiers Road, Loughton, IG10 4NF. And over to Callum Wright again. Callum, you're presenting this one.
Thank you very much, Chair. Right, so the second application I'm discussing today is a proposal for a single-storey rear extension to an existing garage, an additional single-storey rear/side wraparound extension, alterations to the garage roof and front garage door with a brick infill replacement door, and rear external timber decking. The scheme is brought forth to the Planning Committee due to an objection received from a ward councillor as well as at least one non-councillor resident. The scheme in question is 51 Algiers Road, a semi-detached house located within a built-up area of Loughton. It is not listed nor in the conservation area nor within the green belt. No protected trees lie within the site. These are some of the, well, this is an aerial photo of the site. You can sort of see each adjacent neighbour, number 49 Algiers Road and number 53. This is the front elevation or the site as seen from the street. Some members may be familiar as this was previously refused at committee with a different scheme where there was a first floor side extension sort of in this gap. This application actually is a revised version of that where the first floor elements have been omitted. There's actually no alterations to the front elevation. They are all now single story elements. This is the rear elevation and sort of the context with the neighbours at number 53. You can also see that there's this existing lean-to glazed structure there. This is the opposing boundary where there is the single-storey side garage. This is number 49 Algiers Road, where there is a separation gap between the properties there of 1 metre. This is the opposing neighbours at number 53. So these are the existing ground floor and first floor plans. And these are the proposed. This is the ground floor. So we've got the first of the 2 single-storey rear extensions, projects from the rear of the garage there. And then we've got the second, which runs along the boundary by 5.73 metres from the garage. And then there's obviously the opposing side, which is in the footprint of the existing lean-to structure, runs 6 metres along this neighbouring boundary of number 53. It's noted, and I'm not sure if my pictures demonstrated it, that there is an extension on that side as well, which is 3 metres. So there is essentially 3 metres along this boundary at 3 metres height. Obviously, the previous reasons that this was refused under committee were the first floor side extension, as mentioned, and the loss of a church-style flank window. These changes have essentially been, that first floor element has been omitted. So, in effect, this is to be assessed just as single-story elements. In terms of character, the proposed ground floor side rear extension
It's set in from the common boundary by 1 metre. It's a subservient design and not visible from the street scene, as seen on the existing and proposed images here. There are other amendments, obviously, to change into the roof of the garage itself, sort of a reduction in height. And then there is so apologies. There is all other elements sort of here sitting in this gap are non-visible. In terms of amenity, the proposed ground floor side extension is contained within the flank wall of number 49, so there would be no impacts of 49 in any regard in terms of loss of light, overlooking, overbearing and visual impact. No further impacts are envisaged from the proposed extension to the rear of the garage. To add, as mentioned above, the proposed rear dormer can be built under permitted development, and a level of overlooking from the rear dormer is not uncommon within urban areas where there already exists a level of mutual overlooking across properties. The proposed single-storey rear extension does project 6 metres from the original rear wall, but as I mentioned, 3 metres of this would be only project beyond the neighbour's rear extension. Given the units and the orientation of the units and the placement, it's not considered that this would be harmful in terms of light or casting shadows, as they are facing north, and the 2-storey elements already cause some loss of light within that gap. So we're aware that we've acknowledged the representations received. However, we consider that these concerns are addressed within the new design put forth. For the reasons set out above, having regard to all matters raised, it's recommended that conditional planning permission is granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Callum.
This time.
Yep. So we have 2 speakers on this application. We've got Mr. Gregory Mason, who's one of the objectors, here in person. Mr. Mason, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm the next door neighbour of James, the applicant. I've been in 49 Aldridge Road for 26 years. Firstly, the fact that the first floor extension is removed from the plan is a really positive thing, so thanks for that. But I'm still objecting because of the size and scale of this development. If you look at what was proposed just over a year ago, it was one single side extension, which would have resulted in about 16 square metres additional space. Now, there's effectively a total of 5 extensions, I'll explain in a minute, which totals over 70 square metres of space. That includes the loft conversion, which has just been approved under permitted development. That in itself is about 20 to 25 square metres. And then on top of that, the garage itself is being extended backwards, which is actually quite difficult to interpret from the plan. But if you look closely, the garage extends along my boundary wall by at least 1 metre to 1.5 metres. There's 2 new rear extensions being built on both sides of the house. One is 26 metres squared as opposed to the 26.1 and not the 21.6 that it says on the plan. If you do the calculation, then the other side is 8 square metres, and then the side extension is a total of about 15.5 square metres, and not 8.6 as shown on the plan. So that's, my objection is really based on the size and scale of this. It's really an enormous set of extensions, and the issue for me is not so much at the rear, where the rear extensions don't really impact me too much, but the side extension, which, as I said, is 6 metres long, nearly 3 metres wide and 3 metres high, is really quite a significant impact over my existing wall and existing fence. It's difficult to see, but you can see obviously it's 1 metre away, and that fence and wall is relatively low compared to the 3 metres of that extension. Now, the other thing I wanted to say is I'm definitely not against James extending the house. We've had our house extended, and I'm quite happy to do that. But I think this is oversized and overbearing, and I would really like to see either the side extension removed from this plan or scaled down quite a bit, because that's the thing that is causing it to be overbearing. The other thing I wanted to mention is the garage, because I want to confirm that the existing garage space is all going to stay as garage space. It says so on the plan, but I'm confused about the need to have 3 front doors. So I'd like to confirm that that is all staying as garage and not going to be, occupied space. Thank you.
We can maybe pick up that point during the discussion, or it might even be addressed by the second speaker on this, who is Mr. Fernando Molines, who's the applicant's agent via Teams. Mr. Molines, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening to everyone, and thanks for your attendance. Firstly, I want to address the garage. The garage will stay as garage, absolutely. There's no plans for additional accommodation of any sort there. And then let me just explain. The application is for side and rear extensions at ground floor level exclusively. The aim of the design is to provide additional living space to cater for the needs of the family. Existing kitchen and dining areas are sorely lacking in terms of space and light, which the proposal seeks to address. This, as you all know, is not the first iteration of the design we have submitted, and we have been working closely with our based officer for previous applications, Mr. Mohammed Rahman, to determine a massing that could be acceptable. The side extension is proposed as 2.7 meter wide by 5.7 meter long volume attached to the existing garage. A small lobby of about 1 square meter is proposed to be created at the corner of the garage to allow for access both into the house as well as directly to the rear garden. The rear extension takes an L shape with a main volume containing the living and dining area, extending up to 6 meters from the existing rear wall, as Callum mentioned previously. And this is joined by a more modest glazed volume proposed as an extension to the existing kitchen. And this one is just 80 centimeters longer than the existing external WC. The smaller kitchen extension is kept shorter than the main living dining to avoid a bulky look, specifically, and to maintain a hierarchy between the volumes as well. Well, both side and rear extensions are kept very low, with a maximum height of 3 meters, when measured as per the permitted development right for householders' technical guidance. Even though this is not strictly necessary in the householder planning application, the low height is a conscious decision made to minimize the visual impact of the new construction on the neighboring amenities, especially on number 49. It is noted that, despite our best efforts, some objections remain, specifically related to the massing and scale of the proposed extensions, as we just heard. Well, in relation to these concerns, I would like to draw your attention to a very clear precedent at number 53, Algers Road. Number 53 is the neighboring property to the east, with a symmetrical layout and virtually identical massing to number 51. This property has achieved a much bigger overall extension volume than what we're currently proposing through the following applications. I'll just give you the reference. EPF 242722, which is an application for a larger home extension measuring 6 meters, height to width of 3 meters. And EPF 242522, which is an application for a 2-story rear extension, 3 meters from the existing wall, and a dormer to create improved habitable rooms in the loft space. Upon review, it becomes apparent that the approved extensions at number 53 are of a larger scale and arguably a much bigger impact than what we're seeking for number 51. Both applications above have been submitted on the permitted development rights, and being the property symmetrical, this sets a very strong precedent for number 51 to achieve the same type of extensions as well. Given our proposal is for a much more contained volume than what has already been approved at number 53, we would see a refusal of the current proposal as actually being penalized for being less ambitious than our neighbors, which in our view, it doesn't appear to be a
Thank you, Mr. Molines. Your 3 minutes are up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your contribution. If we can move on to one of the ward councillors who's here, Councillor Baldwin.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes. Wow, this is quite an extension. I think we still need a little bit of a clarification. I'm still kind of confused precisely what's going on here. Yeah. I believe that the garage is being extended backwards to be in alignment with the rear of the property. Looking at the rear of the property, it's not level all the way across. I think there has been a previous extension to the rear. So first of all, I'd like to know whether the garage is going to be built backwards to be in alignment with the existing extension. And then this new extension, will that be 5.7 metres from the rear of the extended garage? How far does that go back? Or is the 5.7 metres the extension from the rear of the other side of the house? So that's a little bit of confusion for me. Other thing I'd like to say is that the height of the proposed extension on the side of number 51, 3 metres, is quite a, those words used, quite a massing and scale. 3 metres. I mean, normally I think with garden outbuildings, it's 2.5 metres is allowed, but this 3 metres will present quite a sheer wall along the side of number 51, which I know it's recessed in 1 metre, but it certainly would affect the amenity, I believe, of number 51. In terms of light pollution, I'm not sure if there's any windows along that flank side. I don't believe there are, but nonetheless, I think there is a roof light is proposed, and I think that could be a source of light pollution. It is an enormous extension. I'm not quite sure whether it's 1 extension or 3 extensions, but anyway, in totality, as the objector has stated, it does present less than 70 metres squared, including the loft conversion, which can be done under permitted development. But still, this is an enormous extension. I think what to say. I think one good thing is that there is the conditions which prevent the roof being used as a terrace. I think that is a good thing. I believe I'd also like some clarification from the officer whether the garage height is being raised, because at the moment the garage is not 3 metres. So will that be raised up to the 3 metre height of the proposed extension? So I think I'll stop there. Thank you. So I just need some clarification.
Yeah, Callum, if you wouldn't mind just coming back in on some of the queries that Councillor Baldwin has raised. I think specifically with regards to the garage would be helpful to start off with, because it was something that was mentioned in the objector's comment as well. Maybe just whilst we're waiting for Callum to bring it up, Councillor Owen, if you wanted to...
Just to make a quick comment, because number 53 was said as a precedent, but 53 backs onto the road. It has no impact on its neighbours, so I'm just going to say I don't think it's the same, to be honest.
Okay. And I was actually interested to see where number 53 is in relation to the road and what was done as far as their extension was concerned. But if we'll start off with just some of the comments or clarification on the comments that Councillor Baldwin has made.
Apologies, could you just give me a sort of a nudge on those exact comments?
Yeah, sure. So, Councillor Baldwin, would you mind just repeating some of the key things that you'd mentioned?
Oh, yes.
Callum's benefit.
Yeah.
You might.
Yes. Could Mr. Wright to say, will the height of the garage be raised to 3 metres, and will it also be built back to be in alignment with the main house?
So the height of the garage is 3 metres throughout as it projects into the rear garden. Obviously, there's some probably surround sections, but you can see from the front elevation there. But yeah, it's maintained at 3 metres. There's a slight drop in the land as it goes to the rear, but it's sort of what's called negligible difference.
And also, I mean, is the garage being extended to be in alignment with the main house?
Oh yes, apologies. So yeah, I've got the dimensions here. The actual depth of when you refer to the main house, do you mean the main building of the garage? Because that's how the garage was as existing, in alignment with the rear of the main house. Yeah, sorry, of the original building, and then before it steps out into the gable-ended outrigger, that's where the new extension is being proposed. So apologies if I wasn't clear on that in the first presentation.
And Callum, would you mind just showing some images of where 51 sits in relation to 53, if you have them?
Yeah. So here is that's 49. This is 53. Sorry, that's from the adjacent neighbour. Yeah. So here's 51 with 53. You can see the neighbouring extension there. You can see the non-original lean-to glazed structure. Obviously, the whole area where the development is being proposed is bound by these two original two-storey outriggers. So sort of as the extension is facing, as the dwellings are facing north, you've got the sun coming in from obviously the east and west, being somewhat blocked by these structures anyhow.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chris Pond and then Councillor Morgan.
Well, it's quite simple, Chairman. Too large, too bulky, inappropriate massing to the detriment of the neighbours.
Could we see the actual block plan, please? Because that might put it in perspective, because I can't work out 53 in relationship to the road. But if we see the block plan, we probably could. Thank you.
Just give me a moment. This should be in my package.
Okay, yeah. I think the previous image that you just had there, Callum, I think it sets it out nicely, to be honest. Yeah, the roadmap would be sufficient, I think, for this.
Yeah, okay. Here we go. Yeah, so that's the location plan there.
Yeah.
So you can see the orientation of the units.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, are you able to zoom into it? That's, I mean, if not, I think it's perfectly visible here. So 53 does. Yeah.
No, apologies, I can't zoom in. I mean, if you really want,
That's fine. Thank you. Councillor Rose Brooks, did you want to come in on anything? No? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. I did go on the site visit last year, actually, and I should have declared an interest in that. I live around the corner, but as I never met the applicants before, and I didn't feel it was appropriate to declare any sort of interest. But it just struck me, really, just to reinforce what Councillor Pond has said, that when we saw the two, we looked around both of them, actually, that evening, and it's just too much, really, the combination of the different developments, and it is a significant impact. Obviously, everyone wants more space now. Most people are working at home some of the time. And just like the one we saw around the corner not that long ago, it was just a bit too much, which I voted against, which got passed. It's just too much on that site in the middle between the two neighbours.
Thank you. Councillor Allgood.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible to get the plan again where I can see the neighbour's rear line and this 5.5 metres or 3 metres? How far is it actually from the neighbour's line, the new extension?
Moved. In regard to what side?
Sorry, the one we're disputing, the garage side. So basically, how far from the rear footage of the neighbour is the extension going beyond? I mean, we've talked about 5.5 metres, but that's actually from the back of the garage. So
Yes,
how far is the new building going to be covering the neighbour?
Beyond the neighbouring rear wall, apologies to interrupt, beyond the neighbouring rear wall, I've measured a distance of 3.35 metres, and then obviously the gap between that boundary to number 49 is 1 metre throughout, as the wall is parallel to the boundary.
Okay. Members, I think we can vote to move to a vote on this. So the officer's recommendation is to approve with conditions. If we can have a show of hands of all those in favour.
3, Chairman.
And all those against.
Councillor Nweki, you stepped out of the meeting, I'm afraid, so you can only abstain. Yep. Seven, Chairman.
And abstentions.
4, Chairman.
Okay, so if we move on to the grounds for refusal on that application, does anybody want to give it a go?
Shall I give it a go?
Yeah. Do you want to switch your mic on?
I think
Do you want to put your mic on? Yep.
I think grounds for refusal is excessive bulk and scope of the development. Suggest Councillor Palmer.
To that, I would add, and its proximity to the neighbours number 49 and detriment to their enjoyment of their property.
So, members, those are our grounds for refusal. If we can have a show of hands, all those in favour.
Ten, Chairman.
And all those against.
None, Chairman.
And do we have any abstentions?
5, Chairman.
Okay, so that application has been refused. So moving on to agenda item 15, exclusion of public and press.
None, Chairman.
Okay, so I officially declare the meeting closed at 8:27. Members, this will be our last Plan South meeting for December before January. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you.